Okay, gang, we are moving into lesson 1.3. Again, we're sort of in a review pattern here. We're going to review our subtraction of integer rules, so when we're done, we need to be able to subtract integers accordingly and appropriately. Now, again, with the previous section of adding integers, we can fall back on some models. And so I'm going to start with modeling integer subtraction on a number line. So we have 3 minus 8. So we're going to start at 0. And because our 3 is a positive, that is going to move us 3 units to the right. From there, a minus 8, again, minus will, in many cases, minus changes directions, but in this case, the minus is going to move us back to the left 8 units. And you'll notice once we've moved to the right 3 and back to the left 8, we end up at negative 5. So my solution in this particular case, 3 minus 8 is negative 5. Okay, so again, that's just the moving right and left on a number line. Let's do another example there. So negative 4, so if I start at 0 and that negative moves me to the left 4 units. And then minus 2, well, the minus sign, the negative, or if you want to treat that as a negative, is going to move me to the left 2 more units. You'll notice I end at negative 6. So my solution in this case is a negative 6. Okay. So again, and this is just a modeling of sliding right and left on a number line as we go along. Now here's the thing that is going to trip some people up, is when we run into this minus a negative, but this works on a number line as well. Okay, so when I do this, starting with 2, well, positive 2 tells me to start at 0 and move to the right on a number line. Well, the negative here, this minus sign, 2 minus, tells me, well, that's a minus. I better change directions, and I better go back to the left. However, I run into another negative sign, which is telling me, uh-oh, I've got to flip again, and I've got to go now to the right. Okay, so every time I see that minus or that negative, it's telling me basically to go the opposite direction. So I started at 2, I went to the right, but this one tells me, oh, go to the left. However, the next one tells me, go to the right, and it's going to force me to go to the right 3 more places. Well, when I get all said and done doing that, moving to the left, moving to the right, I end up at positive 5. So that would be the modeling of subtraction of the integers on a number line going from left to right. Now, again, I am a rule kind of a guy, and so when I look at this, I go 5 minus 9. Well, one of the ways that we can think of it is to add the opposite of. Okay, and a lot of my students in the past have clung to this idea of keep, change, change. Now, where this comes into play is because once I do this keep, change thing, it gets me back to the rules that I was following in the previous section of adding integers. And so here's, if you think of this as add the opposite of, it could be, and again, use whatever method works for you, but it could be useful. So okay, it basically is telling me that 5 I'm going to keep. I'm going to add the opposite of 9. Okay, so the opposite of 9 is a negative 9. And here's where my keep, change idea comes into play. I keep the 5, I change the subtract to add, and I change the sign of to the opposite of my 9, and the opposite of 9 is negative 9. Okay? And where this becomes important is now I am actually following the rules from the previous chapter, or lesson. The previous lesson, signs are different, subtract their values. So 9 minus 5 is 4. And attach the sign of the number that had the larger absolute value, which would be the 9, so I'm going with its sign of negative 4. Okay, so, and if this model of subtraction works for you, then do it. Add the opposite of. Alright, so we'll do the same type of a thing here, we're going to add the opposite of. So I've got negative 9, I keep it. I add, okay, so here's my change. And then the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. And again, if we talk about a little thought bubble here, negative 9 plus the opposite of negative 2. Well, negative 9 plus the opposite of negative 2, the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. And again, now I get to bounce back to my rules from the previous lesson. I have a positive and a negative, so I'm going to subtract their values. 9 minus 2 is 7, and attach the sign of the larger absolute value number. In this case, it's the 9, so I need the negative 7, or the negative for the 7. All right? Let's think about it here. Negative 4 plus the opposite of negative 3. So keep my negative 4. Add the opposite of negative 3. Well, the opposite of 3, which would be a negative 3. I tried to think of that backwards. And so now I have negative 4 plus negative 3. Well, two negatives added together. So 4 plus 3, and because they're both negatives, go with the negative sign. Keep, change, change. Keep the negative 4, change to add, change to the opposite sign, opposite number. And we can do this with multiple numbers. Just do them from left to right. So, okay, if we just start with these two numbers and ignore this part back here. Negative 7 minus 3. Okay, so that is negative 7 plus the opposite of 3, which is negative 3. Well, negative 3 and negative 7, because the signs are the same, add them together and go with negative, because they're both negatives, for your sign. I now need to bring this part of the problem into the mix. Okay, so I have minus negative 4, and I'm going to go ahead and, all right, keep my negative 10, change to addition, change to the opposite of negative 4, which is positive 4. And now I rely on my rules. Well, positive and negative, I better subtract them. So 10 minus 4 is 6. And I'm going to use the tens sign because it has the larger absolute value. And I'm hoping over time you will actually see some shortcuts, because there are some shortcuts in here. One of those being that minus a negative ultimately results in a plus. Okay. And again, we could always do this part even in our head on a number line. If I start at negative 7 and move to the left 3 units, I end at negative 10. Okay. So we have, and we can even sort of put those different models together if we need to. So, all right. So go ahead and work on that subtraction of integers. Time for you to do some practice. As always, good luck. Come see me for any help that you might have. Go.